Way back in the 1960s, a Swedish company, fishing tackle company, ABU, brought out a reel that was slightly different to the American spin casting reels that had a cover on the front, but it became known as a closed-faced reel, and this is a good example. This was the reel that came after it. The first reel was the ABU 505, and then a bit later they brought out the ABU 506, and they were made to a tremendous quality, real Swedish engineering. This one's 50 years old, belonged to a good friend of mine, and it still works perfectly right. A little bit noisy, but it does everything that you want. Now, back in the 70s, certainly growing in the 60s, but back in the 70s, these reels became incredibly popular. Centre pins for trotting had become far less popular. People started to use the Mitchell reels. When the Mitchell match gained a lot of popularity at the end of the 60s and into the 70s, there were really only two reels to use for match fishing: ABU 506 and the Mitchell match, which is still my favourite float fishing reel. And both were highly suited to fishing with the standard sort of 2-pound lines. In the West Midlands there was a great preference for close face reels, fishing rivers like the Severn and the Warwickshire Avon. On the Trent and in the Fens there were still centre pin anglers. People did use the close face reels, and plenty used the Mitchell matches. Certainly on the places like the Wide Welland, where people like Ivan Marks were casting right across with zoomers, a 506 just doesn't cut it. You just can't cast far enough, easily enough with one of these. They will cast a long way, but not that far, whereas the Mitchell match could do that with ease in the right hands anyway. These are very, very good reels. They're well made, they're very simple, they don't tangle. That's the great thing. On a windy day, the line is underneath this cover. You've got the winding cup there, and it keeps things out of the way. You can get tangles. You get a strong enough facing wind, it will get round the spool. And the early spools, like on this one, are alloy spools, and later on they made spools with a bit of chenille. This Daiwa reel one has got chenille round the edges to help stop the line getting past the edge of the spool. So for years these were very popular, and there was a bigger one, a 507 and a 508 for a right hand wind. It was bigger and heavier. They're not that light reels, but that had a faster wind and less problems with the line coming off. And that's, if we look at this Daiwa spool, which is very similar to the Abu spool, see it's quite a narrow spool, not very much width, and the line lay is okay, but it's quite simple line lay. If we look at the spool on the Mitchell match, we can see that it's quite a lot, it's deeper. The line lay is absolutely fantastic. It's up there with the very best. Even the best of the Shimanos nowadays, they're not any better than that. They're as good as that, but no better. So when it came to long casting, the line lay on here, it's going to tend to bed in, especially when you wind in a big fish, and you don't want that trotting, so you might get a jerkiness. So the way around that with reels like the Abu were to not put too much line on it, put maybe 50 yards of line, and that was all, and stop the bedding in. They're not as fast as the Mitchell match. These bring in about 2 foot of line. The Mitchell match is about 2.5 foot of line, and I think some Shimanos and 6-to-1 ratios would do even more than that, and some of the Mitchell matches, the 840. But they're a good reel, people still like them. There's a bit of a problem if you want to use one, and people who are starting trotting, they're not a bad choice. They're very easy to use. You press the button, you cast in, you let the line come off the reel. when you get a bite, you put your finger across there, so you got it open, just turn it, pin clicks out inside, picks up the line, and away you go. Really simple, winding the fish. There's another design disadvantage with these is because of the winding cup, the line is not only on the little pin there, which I'll show you there, but it's coming across the cup itself for about 1.5 centimeters or so, and that's friction. So when you're winding in a fish, you've got to do what they call pumping. So you lift up the rod and then wind down, lift up the rod, wind down. With fixed spool reels, you've only got the pickup roller, or even if the roller doesn't work like the Mitchell Match, it's a very small amount of friction there, and you can just wind straight in, no bother at all. The other problem is that the manufacturing precision that Abu brought to their reels was phenomenal. They were made in Sweden, they were well engineered, and you could wear certain parts out. I had a 505 that I bought in 1973, and I used it very, very heavily for about 5 years until I switched to Mitchell Matches. And a certain part, the part that holds the spool, has got 2 brass or bronze rods going into the back of the reel, and the torque on the spool with the pressure of the line would wear the sides of those rods, those bronze rods, brass rods, and so I had to replace those about every 18 months. I think I went through about 4 on that 505, which I sold long ago. So that's one disadvantage. Different manufacturers tried to copy the 506. About the best copies you can find are the Daiwa ones. This is a 120M, there's a 125. They're pretty good. They've got a proper anti-reverse that actually works. Click it on and off. The 506 had a permanent anti-reverse, and what people did was they took the reel apart, took the little anti-reverse pawl out of it, and so the reel will go both ways, which is what's happened to this one long ago. So if you're looking for a more modern version and you can't find a decent Swedish made ABU 506, 505 or 507, then Daiwa's probably your best bet. The other people who tried to make these reels were in the mid-70s. Shakespeare made a reel, but the quality was never there. They didn't last very long, and people soon found that they were worn out, they just didn't work, and they wore them out pretty quickly. I'm trying to think who else made them. I think Dam made one, quite big, and there was another one as well, neither of which lasted that long. So the choice is limited. They're not brilliant for casting. They're okay for short distances, fairly heavy floats. They're good at preventing tangles, good for learning to trot fairly close in. My preference, having used the Mitchell Matches for not that far off 50 years now, is a Mitchell Match, an open face reel. I dig these reels out for nostalgia's sake once in a blue moon, and these 2 reels work fine, a little bit noisy. So there you have it. Not my trotting reel of choice. Some people still swear by them, plenty of people swear at them. Probably not a reel you want for big fish, although they say the 507 was designed for salmon spinning and pike fishing. Yeah, one to think about. Definitely one to think about, but actually getting hold of a decent reel, you're looking at second hand now. No one's making them anymore. Daiwa have stopped. Abu tried to resurrect the 506 and the 507 with some Far Eastern made reels that do not have the quality. They are nothing like as good. People who've got them have said, why did I bother? Sorry, but they're just no good. And there you are. I think the other one, that there was a Ryobi made some reels for a while that looked good but didn't last. Some of these Abu 506s and the 507s can fetch up to £200. A really good 506 can be £80 or £90, but they're well made. This reel has been incredibly abused. The winding cup's a bit bashed and knocked about. I've got no intent. I paid a grand sum of £2 for it. My mate sold it to another one of my mates, and I bought it off him for the same money, £2. It cost about £11 new. But it's just nice to have this reel and fish with it once in a blue moon. I think that's about all I can say. I've listed the advantages and disadvantages, and until next time, it's goodbye for now.